Hey there, Eduardo from Beto here, and today we are going to talk about the 4 stages of learning. It doesn't matter what you want to learn, you will have to go through all of these 4 stages. E lembra, pessoal, que se você não estiver acompanhando muito bem, se você não estiver entendendo o que eu estou falando, no YouTube você pode ligar aqui embaixo, né, aqui no cantinho, a legenda em inglês e em português, e no nosso site, no nosso blog betaenglish.com.br/blog, você também vai ter acesso a esse vídeo em formato de post com a transcrição e a tradução do lado, ok? So, the first stage of every learning is called unconscious incompetence. Yeah, it sounds bad, I know. But the idea here is that your understanding of the subject is in such a basic level that you are unaware of how much you don't know yet. You're so strictly and narrowly focused on the basics that you can't see the bigger picture. In terms of language learning, that would mean that you would be focusing on the pronouns, you would be focusing on the most common verbs, on the most used adjectives, and you would be learning how to structure a phrase in English, you would be learning the nouns of the subjects that interest you the most, you would be learning how to introduce yourself, how to approach someone in English. So all of this basic stuff is what you should be focusing on in the beginning, and that's normally how learning goes. And well, you may take some time in the beginning, if you are starting from absolute scratch, to adapt yourself to this new study routine, to decide which methods, which materials we're going to use to study. So that may take a little bit of time, you may start slowly because of that, but actually, this first stage is the quickest to go through in terms of learning. Since everything is new to you, everything is a new learning opportunity. You will be learning everything in a very fast pace in the beginning. And in fact, Josh Kaufman, which is a best-selling author, he in his TED Talk, he said that in only 20 hours of study, of deliberate practice, you are able to learn a new skill. In terms of language learning, that would mean that you are able to show proficiency. You are able to, express yourself, express your ideas, even though you may be using simple and short sentences to do so. And he gives a lot of example in his TED Talk. He talks about how he learned how to play ukulele in 20 hours. And from my experience, this amount of hours is quite accurate. In 20 hours of deliberate practice, of deliberate study, you are indeed able to show, to demonstrate learning and proficient in English, and even to be considered at an intermediate level. That is more or less when you would reach the second stage of learning, which is conscious incompetence. Now you know you suck. There are 2 defining characteristics of this stage, okay? The first of them is now that you are not so narrowly focused on the basics, you are indeed able to see the bigger picture, and you are able to see how much there is to be learned. In terms of English learning, that could mean that you are able to notice some peculiarities in certain pronunciations, that you now know that there are lots of different words that can be used to define the same things, but each of them can be used in a different context. It could mean that now you are aware there are some expressions that if you change just a little preposition and just a little context, it may change the whole meaning. So you now know some of the complexities of the English language, and that you don't know them, and you will have to study them. This is one of the defining characteristics, and the other is that now, on the second stage of learning, you are able to identify your mistakes, and you are able to even correct some few of them. These 2 are great characteristics, but unfortunately this stage is probably the hardest one to go through. It's the stage that most people are at in terms of language learning, and it's the stage that most people give up. And that is because most of us, as humans, we are trained to perceive certain things with negativity. So when facing the first defining characteristic, which is that now you are able to perceive how much there is to learn, you may think that, oh my God, look at how much there is to learn. I can't possibly see myself learning all of these things. It's just too much. The road is too long. Will I ever be able to reach where I want to go? So you may start to doubt, to question yourself. And that gets even worse when you combine that with the second defining characteristic, that now you are able to see your own mistakes. So basically, you are conscious of your incompetence. You know you suck. You know you make a lot of mistakes, and when you meet someone that's much better than you, you inevitably compare yourself with that person, and you feel bad because there's such a huge difference between your skill level and this person's. And that kind of negative thought can be highly demotivating, and that makes people quit, that makes people give up. And that's why some of the videos that I've already created, talking about great goals, talking about how to set milestones to track your progress towards your goal, and how to elaborate a good study plan, these videos, while they are not mandatory for learning, they are especially important in the second stage. Because more often than not in the second stage, you feel stuck. You feel that you are not progressing. You feel that you can only see your mistakes and how much there is to learn. You can't see how much you are learning right now. Measuring your progress would give data to you to show you that you are improving, that you are learning, that you are moving forward. And that, my friends, may give you just the right amount of motivation for you to reach the third level, the third stage of learning. The third stage of learning is called unconscious competence. Now, there's a very thin line between the second and the third stage. There's a lot of gray area between both, and it's because competence is something that doesn't happen overnight. Competence requires consistency, requires repetition. So in a way, it's a lot like working out. You have to work out every day, and if you do that consistently enough, eventually you will see the results. But you don't see them on the short term, you won't see them in your day by day. But there will come to a point that you will be indeed competent in English. And there is a defining characteristic of this third stage that comes together with competence, is that now you are able to express yourself with more detail, with a more formal and diverse vocabulary. You understand how things work. You have a pretty good amount of knowledge of expressions, of slangs, of vocabulary, specific vocabulary of what you've been studying. You know it. You can write well, and you can communicate well with someone. But in this stage, you still have to struggle to do that. It takes you a lot of effort. You have to put a lot of thought into what you're doing. You have to be really focused and paying close attention to everything you're doing in English, but you are indeed able to do everything. There's a feeling of surprise that is quite often perceived in this stage. This is when you've just done something great and you realize that you were not able to do that before. So you think, look at me, I've just had a normal, fluid conversation with an American, and I wasn't able to do that before. that feeling is characteristic of the third stage of learning. And when these moments of surprise that boost your confidence, that you get even more motivated, because in a way this is you seeing the results of your study, when these moments get even more frequent, it's a hint, it's a tip, it's an indication that you are entering in the fourth stage of learning, which is conscious competence. And in this stage, regardless of your definition of competence, regardless of how good you think you are, by definition, this stage is the stage that you are able to do everything you could on the third stage, but it's much more natural. You don't have to think a lot to do all of the things that you were able. In terms of language learning, that means you've become fluent. You're able to communicate without having to think beforehand, without having to structure. You just open your mouth and it flows in English because you are used to speaking English. You understand almost everything that you're listening because you've listened so much that it's just natural, it's second nature to you. So these are the four stages of learning. And I didn't come up with this classification. It's something that was created by a guy named Martin Broadwell back in 1969. So that's definitely not something new. I'm just introducing this view on learning to you and making some relations with language learning. So tell me, in which stage are you? I would love to hear from you in the comments, and just remember guys that just subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for you to receive notifications or when I post new videos. Liking and sharing this video will help me greatly, so if you are indeed liking the content that I am creating, please do so, and see you on next video.